Garvescope show. This is the show where independent filmmakers tackle topics relevant to independent filmmakers, especially the business side of the industry, because we all know filmmakers make great artists and terrible business people. My name is Ben Garvis. I'm an indie filmmaker, award-winning, I guess, if that means anything in the modern era of filmmaking. But hello, and welcome to the show. Hello, TikTok. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Instagram. Hello, Twitch. Hello, wherever it is that you're bootlegging this or I'm streaming it. Welcome. Let's talk about the agenda today. We've got lots to talk through. I know I say that every show, but dude, what a couple of weeks we've had in the film industry. We're going to go through Room Tone, the segment where we talk about everything that's going on in the news. We're going to do Above the Line, where we rank things. This week we are ranking trades. What are the most effective and helpful trade publications in the industry right now? We're going to... sorry, TikTok, you need a little bit of help, huh? Okay, let's help you out, little TikTok. While that's doing that, we will then... Oh, no, come on. TikTok needs all the attention. While we're doing that, we are also going to talk through waves this week, a topic that is really making waves this week, and that is tax credits in the film industry and how they're helping and how they're hurting. Or are they helping and are they hurting? We will talk through that. We will then talk about we will do a Cam A or Cam B segment, which is where we put two important things side by side in the industry, and we try to decide what is the better take for you and your film. We'll do an out of focus. We'll do an out of focus where we're talking about one of the common hot takes in the film industry and whether or not it's accurate. Then we'll do a Real or Real segment where it's common. Everyone really is loving Real or Real, so we're going to do more Real or Real this time. Real or Real is a segment where we take a film that's been completely made up by AI and a totally obscure real movie, and we put them side by side and we try to guess which one is real, which one is fake. Then we're going to do a hot take, taking on the hot take, which is talking about this week YouTube distribution, whether or not it's a viable plan for filmmakers. We'll do Lights, Camera, Lawsuit, talking about the movie Yesterday, which had a really fascinating lawsuit attached to it. And then we're going to do Following Stephen Follows this week. A couple of things, but I think one of the headlines is Harvey Weinstein. I think you remember at the peak of the Me Too movement, there was a story going around that Harvey Weinstein had been thanked more than God at the Oscars. Stephen Follows went in and actually dug up the data on that, so we're going to kind of take a peek at that along with a couple of other things, and that's generally our run of show for this week. Let's start with Room Tone, the segment where we dig through the news. There is a lot going on in the industry. I'm going to try to not only talk about AI in filmmaking, which has just been the general topic trend for us the last couple of shows. But there are a couple of little honorable mentions. One of them is, James Cameron last week or the week before had kind of opened up a little bit about his hopes for AI and the ways that he's thinking about using it, specifically saying that he thinks that you need to embrace AI technology as a way to produce tentpole and blockbuster sized films for much less. That allows you to keep staff, not eliminate staff. You can debate those merits all you want to. At the same time, you have Ted Sarandos, the co-CEO of Netflix, saying that he hopes that these movies could be 10% better because of AI, not just 50% cheaper. Now, Deadline kind of looks at this as him saying, instead of making movies 10% cheaper, we are going to make them 10% better. But I'm looking at this story, and it looks to me like he is saying specifically 10% better and not just 10% cheaper. So he wants to get more juice from the squeeze, and at the same time reduce the amount of juicing that you're doing. I don't know. Ted Sarandos pops up a couple of times in the show this week, so say what you will about him. I am trying very hard not to form an early opinion. All right, next story is: can Netflix reach the $1 trillion club by 2030? So back to Ted Sarandos. I told you he's going to make a couple of cameos. This was a story in Wrap Pro. Well, in the Wrap, but you have to have the Pro, whatever. Yeah, so Netflix is basically on their earnings call this week said that they are setting a goal and doubling down their efforts to become a $1 trillion company. As of markets close on Wednesday, Netflix's total market cap size, like the total value estimate of their company, was $481 billion. So they need to more than double where they're at right now. They have started only publishing their subscriber numbers when they hit major milestones, so that the closest number that we know about their subscriber base is a little bit old, but it's 301 million people globally. So they'll need to double that, if not more. But the story, Wrap Pro did a really great job of digging into this. The story goes into all of these things that could impact positively or negatively Netflix's goal to get to that $1 trillion company size. And they said specifically that the main priority will be continuing to scale its ad tier. So if you do not know what that means, Netflix has a couple of different subscription options. One of them is just your blanket subscription for an ad-free experience, but they now, as of a couple of years ago, have rolled out a second tier of support that is fewer ads than you would typically get on another platform, but ads to supplement a lower cost of a subscription for users. With the idea that is making it more available to people who cannot afford the full subscription tier. So growing that out is becoming a huge emphasis for the company, which is really kind of fascinating when you think about it from the perspective of Netflix was and in a lot of ways still is the top level, the case study, the perfect example of a purely SVOD, a purely subscription-based video on-demand platform. And this is basically them admitting that, well, one, they think that they can find more money by adding ads, but two, that they feel like a purely subscriber-based model isn't going to help them scale. Now, diversification in business is always a good thing, but in the world of streaming, where those lines have been pretty set in stone up until the last couple of years when people have been kind of building these hybrid models, this is kind of an interesting thing for them to say that really the future of their business, the thing that will double them in size, is this ad-based video on demand accent to their subscription base. Let's see here. A couple of other quotes from this. eMarketer senior analyst Ross Benes, I'm sorry for every name that I torture on here, said Netflix could also benefit from a winnowing of streaming competitors or a further dissipation of live TV. So we saw a couple of sporting events on Netflix this last year, hit or miss, whether you're talking about the Mike Tyson fight or you're talking about football, soccer, football, things like that. They're getting into this live TV game. They have this John Mulaney live show that they're doing, and they tested it, then they brought it back a little bit more, and who knows, maybe the future is more of that. I've honestly only watched clips of it on YouTube. I like John Mulaney, so maybe I'll see more of that eventually, but as of right now, it is not something that I intend to. I'm not going to be like, Mulaney's on right now, I should hop over to Netflix. But they're building their business model around this idea that live TV is diminishing for conventional providers. There's also this mention of winnowing of streaming competitors, and that is basically saying, hey, there's going to be a consolidation in the market. Disney plus Hulu plus ESPN plus, I feel like they just bought somebody else. You have HBO Max, basically everything that is Warner Brothers Discovery. You have Netflix and MGM coming together, that you're going to have fewer and fewer competitors that you're competing against, and that will ultimately drive more people to the remaining subscription platforms, as long as they continue to diversify and provide better ranges of content. An analyst from Bloomberg Intelligence, I am not going to try to pronounce her name, but she sounds very cool, says that it's very likely Netflix will push into markets like India and Brazil, which have very high broadband penetration, basically the very high rates of people within the country having access to solid internet. But that, there hasn't been deep penetration into those markets yet. She estimates, this is a quote, she estimates Netflix has just 12 million subscribing members in India compared to the 950 million broadband subscriptions in the country. So look, the opportunity for expansion is a huge one. That's something that we talk about here on the Garvescope show all the time, is that the best possible thing you can do as a filmmaker is to niche down. And niching isn't necessarily something that you do just because you are diving deep into a topic, right? If you're going to make a film about the LGBTQ plus experience, that's one thing that is a niche. But there are niches that are market and language specific. If you make a movie that is in Portuguese, then Netflix is effectively going to streaming platforms in general, distributors in general, film festivals in general that are trying to target the Brazilian audience or the Portugal audience are going to embrace that film as something that is more likely to be watched there. And they are then delivering unique niche content to those users and delivering value to those users. So, scale that. So from 12 million to a potential market of 950 million broadband subscriptions in India, that's huge. So, see what they do about an influx of Bollywood-like content. The last little note that I had in here for this Netflix story, I'll quote this whole thing. So it's talking about Ted Sarandos, co-CEO, and Sarandos was talking trash about YouTube / Google a little bit. Kind of interesting shots fired. He says, quote, Netflix is in the spending time business, while YouTube is in the killing time business. Woo! I mean, think about that. As a user, are you going onto YouTube to, I have 5 minutes, let's see what's on YouTube to watch, or are you actively seeking something? I feel like this is a little bit of a disconnect from Sarandos, because me, as a YouTube user, I'd say, yeah, there are things that I enjoy watching. There are specific creators that I will go watch their content whenever new content comes up. And I don't view myself as wasting time when I'm doing that, killing time. I view myself as being entertained, no different than Netflix, but with generally shorter form content. But the thing that I think is like the huge disconnect that YouTube has that Netflix really will never have is the helpful piece. This piece in the wrap pulled a little bit of stats. Netflix accounted for 7.9% of time watching TV in March, trailing behind YouTube's 12%. So Sarandos is talking big game for somebody who's under delivering by half. Hot take? I think it's a hot take. The estimate for the value of YouTube on its own, if it was separated out from Google/Alphabet, is that it is a $550 billion company. So, 12% of 12% of subscriber time spent versus 7.9%. 12% of subscriber time spent versus 7.9% for Netflix. You have $550 billion market value versus about a $480 billion market value. So the Netflix has a lot of work to do. And part of that is shortcomings in content. Some of that is shortcomings in business model. Some of that is the way that they charge people and what they charge people. But it represents an opportunity for independent filmmakers, because at the end of the day, Netflix is going to need a lot more content, and they don't have the infrastructure right now to get that content, and they're not really investing in it in the way they should. But if they're going to stay in business and they are going to continue to grow, if they want to truly double in size in the next, they said 2030, so in the next 5 years, they will have to buy so much niche content for individual markets, India, Brazil, everywhere in Africa, everywhere in Europe, every language, every topic, to continue to build and motivate subscribers to join and to stay. So I think that's awesome. I think it's totally a thing worth looking at. That was a lot on one story. Let's talk about the next one. This is about Sinners. So the big piece of drama last week was that, I think it was Variety wrote basically a hit piece on Sinners. Ryan Coogler's vampire. I didn't know it was a vampire film until I saw people calling it a vampire film. I had seen the trailer, but for some reason it didn't catch on to me that this was a vampire movie. But there's a very unique deal where Coogler was given basically total creative control to do the thing that he wanted to do. He used a much smaller budget, but he filmed in very unique and niche formats that are providing a really incredible theater experience to people. And Variety, despite a really good turnout for the film, basically published a hit piece saying that Sinners significantly underperformed, that it was effectively, it was an okay start, but it's basically inevitably going to bomb. And the community was just like, this is so biased. It felt like it was written from the lens of the industry gatekeepers that were trying to prevent the deal that Coogler had for this film from becoming the norm just because he had good success. Well, that has translated into a really great second week for the movie. The stat behind this is, so the film did $48 million in its opening weekend. That was against a budget of $90 million, right? So it basically brought back about half of its total budget. That obviously doesn't include marketing or any of that, in its first weekend, which was a great outing. If the Electric State and Netflix brought in $175 million, which I feel like its budget was $350 million, its first weekend, then people wouldn't be making fun at Netflix right now. So it brought in $48 million in its first weekend, and then it has basically followed that up by only dropping by about 5% from that $48 million in its second week, which is the smallest second weekend drop for any film north of $40 million since 2009's Avatar. So in the history of film, in the last, 2009, we're talking 16 years. It's been 16 years since a film was able to put up a second week, a significant film, budget-wise, was able to put up a second week performance as great as Ryan Coogler's Sinners with Michael B. Jordan and a lot of other great cast members. It is also the smallest ever for an R-rated film and the smallest ever for a horror pick. So this movie has momentum. It is keeping the momentum up, and it is really proving that when you enable really great filmmakers to make the films that they want to make, that they can succeed. And it's also proving that filmmaker-friendly deals can work out for everyone except for the studio and whoever wrote that hit piece in Variety. Super interesting. Now let's talk some trash. I got the tea. No, I don't. It's no tea. But I do want to say that yesterday I stumbled across the trailer for Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which, it's now a film franchise, right? This is the third movie in the Now You See Me series. I'm kind of sitting here going, who asked for this? It kind of is one of those movies that is just it's a fun movie. It's not like it's a life-changing movie. They do cool practical effects and CGI and everything. They have a cool cast. You know, you have Jesse Eisenberg alongside like Woody Harrelson. Justice Smith is joining. So you look, big cast. But the first movie, I looked these numbers up. The first movie had a $75 million budget. It brought in $351 million. But then the second movie had a basically double $120 million budget and smaller box office. So that halved down to $334 million. And if you're savvy with how how Hollywood handles blockbusters, typically their marketing budget is about the size of the film making budget. So that movie probably was pretty close to breaking even, if not had kind of broken even. So then it's not a good trend for the third movie. But I think that this movie just represents how significantly Hollywood is leaning into existing IP, sometimes to its own fault, right? Everything that you're seeing on Netflix, you're seeing a watering down of the intellectual property of Star Wars. You're seeing a watering down of the intellectual property of Marvel. The diehards are the diehards, and you're still delivering content for that, but a lot of that content doesn't have the global demand from generic watchers, generic audience members. It's so much more common nowadays to stumble into somebody that hasn't seen the latest season of Andor or the latest Marvel movie or even any of the last 10 Marvel movies, even if they're movie buffs. I'm a movie buff. I don't think I've seen the last couple of Marvel films. I definitely haven't watched the last couple of shows to come out on Disney Plus. So it's interesting to me. We're continuing to see this huge drive for tried and tested things instead of creative things. I had a note here that was pretty interesting about how they're marketing for this new Now You See Me, Now You Don't movie. And that was that they apparently put up a QR code on a billboard in Times Square, and any fan who saw it and scanned the QR code was sent an amount of cash virtually, which is interesting marketing play. They spent I guess it's about $250,000 that they sent in digital payments. So, marketing is marketing. If you have $250,000 to throw away, then go ahead. I have not really seen anybody talking about how cool that experience was versus some of the other cool marketing ideas that the industry has had through the years. But, yep. There's another Now You See Me movie. Nobody asked for it, but I'll watch it if I have to. Next story. MoviePass's next big bet. Okay, you want to talk things nobody saw coming? MoviePass is like the company that will not disappear. They're back, this time with an app called Mogul. And Mogul is an app that allows you to compete kind of fantasy sports style for box office results, per screen averages, sentiment scores, awards, and things like that. You basically go in, you pick your films, and it's kind of what a niche app. You know, the company says that they've had 400,000 users that have joined their early access wait list. Is there enough like action going on in the Hollywood world that a fantasy movie app makes sense? I don't know. I mean, I think we all have to go check it out. But what a weird idea. Sometimes the weird works. I don't know. Let's experience it. But Movie Pass, up to more weird stuff. My notes here. So right now, you play with an in-game currency. There's no real money attached. The plan is to move into a second phase in which users will be able to pay for upgrades, and eventually to a third phase in which users can win money. So they're turning it into a betting thing. Betting on the box office in more ways than one. Okay, I think one more AI story, okay? We got breaking news from Deadline. Russell Brand appears in court facing rape and sexual allegation charges. Well, that's fun. Okay. Not for a lot of people. One more AI story, and then I swear we don't have to talk about AI for at least 3 minutes. Natasha Lyonne talks Uncanny Valley, directorial debut, use of copyright clean AI, and the danger of AGI. So this was kind of a big story this week that Britt Marling and Natasha Lyonne are partnering on a movie that's going to be directed by Natasha. Britt Marling, if you don't know her, is a fantastic filmmaker and writer. She did the OA, she did Another Earth, Murder at the End of the World. She has kind of had a pretty quiet career considering how incredible her work is. But the two of them are working together. The description, the log line here is centered on a teenage girl who becomes unmoored by a hugely popular AR video game in a parallel present. The movie will blend traditional live action and game elements. And the big storyline here is that they have been very clear and upfront about the fact that this movie will have significant use of AI-generated content using an AI model that is copyright free. So Natasha is really leaning into... she's been very clear about where she stands about responsible AI use and making sure that every creator in Hollywood and beyond is protected from theft and use of likeness and things like that. This is her basically saying she believes there is a path forward for ethical use of AI. So, you know, people have been asking questions. Asteria Films, which is attached to this, says the film will blend traditional storytelling techniques with, cutting-edge AI technologies to create a radical new cinematic experience. Sounds like some James Cameron stuff to me, bro. And then in an interview, Natasha compared the film's use of AI to a green screen or something like that. So she's looking at this as technology that can accent your workflow, something that makes something easier, right? The green screen was a great invention in the way that, by hand you could go rotoscope out something, right? One frame at a time, just doing it by hand. And the green screen innovated upon that. And the person who was then spending all of this time rotoscoping every clip, every frame of a segment in order to, pull something out of it or add something to it, has now been replaced by the green screen. And that doesn't mean that person didn't have work. They just focused on other things that were more productive use of their by hand rotoscoping. So she says that this tool will allow her to do a film at a greater scale, which is exciting for filmmakers and also product designers and the like. I agree. I mean, we've been pretty blunt about. I've been pretty blunt about how I feel about AI. There is a responsible way forward, and what it ultimately does for independent filmmakers is incredible because it empowers you to do a lot more with a lot less. Now, that power can be abused by the people who have a lot more and are looking to spend a lot less. But for indie filmmakers, in the same way that the digital camera opened up a whole new world to a whole new slew of filmmakers, this gives us that opportunity as an accent to our workflow, as an enhancement, as something that speeds up a process when you're dealing with a $50,000 budget, a $10,000 budget, a no budget versus a company that is spending $300+ million on a film. I think that that's worth noting. And I think we have two more stories here. The next one is just kind of a side note, not a huge thing, but China's launching. This story could be presented better. China launches film consumption year to boost economic growth. I'll read some excerpts from this, but basically the lowdown on this is that China has pulled together a couple of firms who are investing in incentives to help their people ingest more content. The major partners are basically banks and payment platforms, along with leading ticketing platforms that are committing to jointly providing no less than 1 billion yuan, which is about $138 million in the US, in subsidies that will be used to offer discounted movie tickets specifically during peak box office periods like the summer and holiday seasons to get more people into theaters. Good for theaters, good for entertainment, good for restaurants near theaters, good for that going out experience. It's really cool, regardless of the country, to see countries investing in the arts. This is a really interesting way of doing it. There was a note in the story that China is a key driver of domestic demand for basically cultural consumption. They have 90,968 cinema screens nationwide as of 2024, which is the largest movie market by screen count. Cool stat. All right. Last one, interesting money note. And this was on Screen Daily Pro, so you can't read the story unless you subscribe, but I'll just a little insider tip, like you normal ways around paywalls work here. So I'll read you a quote, but basically Europe has put together a fund called the Together Fund, which is raising €100 million, 100 million euros. Right now it's at 58 million in venture capital money to invest in indie film and TV producers. So that's really cool. The snippet is that they're trying to raise enough money to fund 12 to 15 European independent film and TV production companies. In an interview with the person behind the fund, she said, quote, "We're looking to take minority shares in independent scripted film and TV companies, providing venture capital to help them grow. We want to be the independent solution for independent companies. Producers are entrepreneurs, and Axio Capital's business model is all about backing entrepreneurs. I will bring my advice and contacts to the fund. Antoine will also provide funding advice and connections. This is a 10-year fund, so our presence in each of the companies will be limited to 3 to 7 years. We will look to invest in 12 to 15 companies." Great. If you are in the UK, Europe in general. If you are in Europe, look up the Together Fund for film and TV. It may be worth looking at. That's a huge influx of cash. You have access to gatekeepers through it. It's worth looking at and applying to if that's something that becomes available to the public. All right. That wraps up the What's Above the Line segment. Oh, sorry. That wraps up Room Tone. Let's move to What's Above the Line.
I'm going to count to 10.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Okay. In filmmaking, above the line means that you have the influence. Below it, you are taking orders. So today we are ranking film trade publications and deciding what truly deserves a seat at the top. Let's get into it. So I'll start this by saying there are a couple of honorable mentions I don't think anybody is doing terrible work in this space, right? These film trades do a great job of providing us information. Some are large, some are small, some have far-reaching tendrils, some are super niche. I want to give a shout out to Filmmaker Magazine, which is great for like craft interviews and festival coverage. They're less scoop driven, so they're not like knee-jerk reaction-y, and they're definitely more filmmaker focused. Cine Europa, I will never know how to pronounce it correctly unless somebody tells me in the comments. You want to tell me in the comments? I want to give them a shout out. They're solid if you're tracking the European Union or just European film market and public grants there. Give a shout out to No Film School. They're doing their thing. I feel like they're a little bit clickbaity, but that's kind of the game as it is when you are a smaller company competing against huge trades like Hollywood Reporter or Variety. And then below the line, I literally have a segment called What's Above the Line. So shout out to Below the Line, which is basically trades for crew. It gives you union updates, gear stuff, behind the scenes business stuff. Those are my honorable mentions. And then what we'll do is we will go through these trade publications we'll do basically my top 9. And I'll give you the pros and cons of each and kind of why I rank them where they are. Number 9 is Box Office Pro. The pros to me about Box Office Pro is that it's really kind of the go-to for distribution nerds. If you're trying to follow how these things are performing and what the numbers are, the numbers in the industry, Box Office Pro is great for that. They have deep tracking of box office trends and projections and global gross. They have industry reports that you really won't find anywhere else. But these are the cons. It is extremely niche. It really doesn't cover broader film, TV business as a whole. And it kind of reads like a trade journal from 1997 because in a lot of ways it kind of is. Number 8 on the list of my favorite trade publications is World of Real. And I love y'all, World of Real, but you need different fonts, please. I will never talk trash about you, but I will talk trash about your font in every single episode of this show. So pros of World of Real is this deeply niche. It's award season focused, and it's kind of like film Twitter's guilty pleasure because they write the right stories about the right things with the right approach. They operate kind of more like a blog, which are scoops that ultimately typically end up being true. They have bold opinions, they have spicy rankings, and they are really not afraid to ruffle feathers. You can do that when you are a little bit smaller. The downside is, again, sometimes it feels like it's just a person in their basement working on stories, which is great because you have that passion. But that's the scope of what you get. Also, source of vetting can be a little bit shaky. It's not considered a real trade by a lot of people, but I do see it pop up frequently, and I do get news from it. I just find myself occasionally going out to validate that news somewhere else. Number 7 on my list of my favorite trades, and I've quoted from them today, is The Wrap. I think it's great for scoops, especially involving executives and drama and legal battles. It really does a good job of covering box office stuff with decent insights, and it sometimes outpaces the big 3 trades when it comes to reporting on media shakeups. Now, their reputation for clickbait headlines and less rigorous reporting I feel like they're working really hard to combat that, but it is still out there. There's kind of an inconsistent editorial tone and quality. That's what happens when you are a smaller company. feel like that's a trend here, right? And then they're just not, as widely cited as Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, or Deadline. But they belong on this list. Number 6 is one that I've only recently discovered, but I'm spending more and more time on it, and that is The Ankler. They have really great deep insider insights, especially from former trades. They have really good, like, real talk about money, power, and ego in Hollywood, and that candid approach is so refreshing. And it's kind of, it's a Substack style voice that makes it really feel fresh and unfiltered. The cons are, it's a subscription model, with walls off most content. There's kind of like a Hollywood for Hollywood people, less useful to outsiders type of vibe. When you're reading something like The Hollywood Reporter or Vanity, it's like they're largely they do cover the things that you want them to cover, but they're clearly written for a larger audience, to be consumed by a larger audience. And some articles just kind of feel like backroom gossip a little bit, and I'm there for that. I'm not gonna lie, I'm there for that. I love me some gossip. Number 5, I really struggled with this, but I have to put them here. Screen Daily. I think that they are incredible for coverage of international markets, especially, things like Cannes and Berlin and TIFF. They're great for sales agents, distributors, and people tracking global film movements. And it's real journalism with solid writing, and they've done a good job of, the data nerd in me is like, they've done a good job of structuring their website in a way that's very data backed. The cons are that it's very UK centric and slightly less accessible to US readers. The tone is super dry, which I can appreciate, and sometimes it's a little bit more like reading a short excerpt from something that just quickly summarizes it, more so than doing a true deep dive. And yeah, that's about it for Screen Rant. Sorry. We're getting into the meat and potatoes here. Number 4, if I'm ranking all of these industry trade publications, I would say number 4 is definitely IndieWire. They are the most indie friendly of the bunch. We can all appreciate that. They're champions for small films, festivals, and auteurs. I think they have really thoughtful analysis, especially when it comes to criticism and awards predictions. And I appreciate that they cover screaming. There's lots of screaming going on in Hollywood right now. No, they cover streaming and tech and, changing industry structures, which is, I think, super important. And it's sometimes lost on the bigger trades. To do that, to stay on top of those things. Now it's IndieWire, so sometimes it's a little bit like film Twitter, but with a budget. It leans a little too hard into awards obsession, which is I think every filmmaker wants to win an award and they want to be acknowledged for the work that they do, and I understand that culture. And I myself introduce myself as an award-winning filmmaker, so I understand like how easy it is to get awards sometimes. It's also not IndieWire's fault, but they do lack some clout in the industry. They stay on top of stories. Honestly, I think I probably find myself visiting IndieWire more than any other of these sites because of how great their analysis is. But number 3 on the list is going to be The Hollywood Reporter, or THR. Pros, they're really kind of best for long-form investigative features, which is fantastic. It still has some journalistic teeth, which is interesting because the name, for some reason, I associate the name with being more clickbaity, even though it's just not true, right? I'm literally looking at a story right here by The Hollywood Reporter. Los Angeles film and TV production levels plunge. And it is great insights and analysis. It's polished, it's readable, even for like the normies, the average peeps that are popping in to read more about something that they're passionate about. It's actually owned by Penske, which also owns Variety, so that's kind of an interesting twist there. So there's kind of a corporate sameness vibe that's creeping in between that and Variety. They're getting more lifestyle and celebrity adjacent in tone over time, which it's hard, when you're owned by a corporate overlord to try to maintain dry analysis in the face of the greater audiences and value, money-wise, monetary value of covering more gossipy topics. It also then, lags a little bit behind publications like Variety when it comes to breaking big scoops, but we're literally talking a matter of hours, so it's not a wild difference. That brings me to number 2, my second to top, my penultimate trade publication would probably be Deadline. To me, they're a speed demon. I feel like they are often the first in breaking, casting, acquisition, and deal news. They have really great historical culture. They're a hardcore focus on the business stuff, so there's less fluff. It's more deals, data, and sometimes drama. The tone can be pretty arrogant sometimes, and weirdly passive aggressive, kind of like a told ya culture that's living on in its lifespan. The site's kind of a formatting nightmare. It is not my favorite site from an organization standpoint, and it feels sometimes like you're reading in a wind tunnel because things are just kind of flying past you. And there's really less emphasis on investigative or analytical content, which is a fact of life in this industry, but you're going to get that, right? When you get to the bigger trade publications, you're going to get that watering down of the business content in order to focus on the goss, the tea. Speaking of tea, number 1, my top ranked trade publication. I'm sorry, I had to do it. It's Variety, right? It's the industry gold standard and everyone reads it, even if we all pretend that we don't. They have deep studio relationships, which means that they get early access to breaking news. They have solid international coverage, especially for things like award seasons, and it does have an award season obsession. And they're kind of recognized by Google as the top tier source for quoting, and Google boosts it because they see the value there. But there are just so obvious downsides to it, which is one that can be, we talked about it earlier in the show today, it can be a little too friendly with industry power players. It feels like access journalism. It feels like journalism with some bias to it. And there are people there that don't do that, but there are definitely people there that write through a lens that is not filmmaker friendly. The Ryan Coogler and Sinners story is the perfect example of that. The paywall is annoying for sure, and it's definitely getting worse year over year. And the editorials sometimes feel, again, sanitized, like they're being scrubbed by people. That's it. That is my list of my 9 favorite trade publications, and a couple of honorable mentions for the little guys who are working their butts off to become big industry players. Let's dive into the next segment, which is Waves This Week.
From Hollywood headlines to indie upsets, here's What's Making Waves This Week.
So Making Waves This Week is a segment that I've basically set up for us to dig into really big topics. So every week we have our I'm sorry if you're dealing with the drilling noise. The drilling is back. Everybody loves the drilling. Audio quality be damned. The show must go on. Okay, so Waves This Week is basically a show where we dig into what are kind of the bigger stories of the week. So we had our stories of the week. This is like what is like the big theme that we're taking away from things. And I don't think we can avoid talking about it any longer. It sounds so dry. But at least dry in first pass. But we need to talk about taxes and tax incentives in Hollywood, because one of the biggest stories of the week is just LA film and TV production levels plunge. From the Hollywood Reporter. Basically, looking at quarterly reporting for businesses that serve the film industry in the LA area, saw the largest loss in production that they've seen in a long time. The big stats are in the 3-month period from January to March, there were huge losses in every category of production compared to the same period last year, according to a report from Film LA, a nonprofit group that handles film permits for the city and country, issued on Monday. So what they were reporting is that overall shooting in LA decreased over 22% from the same period last year for quarter one. So it's May now, so we've pretty much just wrapped up, give or take a month, the first quarter of the year, and compared to last year, shooting is down in LA by 22%. A lot of people want to say that this is because film tax incentives in California are not supporting the growth of business or the decision to film in the area, that there is a huge movement to move projects elsewhere. And I will dig into that because there's a lot to dig into there. But let me just finish up with this story. So shooting levels in the region, which were exacerbated by reductions in content spend across most studios, last year recorded the lowest figure observed by Film LA since it started tracking data in 2017, excluding 2020. Translate that to say that last year was a terrible year, and this year we're down 22% already. Things are not looking good for Hollywood, LA, and California film productions in general, which takes us to the next story, which was a New York Times piece called "There's a Feeling We're Not in Hollywood Anymore." This is a super deep dive. It's the New York Times, so you have to get through the paywall however you choose to. I'm not condoning, things, but get through the paywall to read the story. I'll go ahead and, find us on YouTube. I will attach the links to most of these stories, the most important of these stories, in the comments section of this live stream. The big piece here is that New York Times is basically reporting on how film and TV productions are very clearly leaving California for other places. They say movies and TV productions are rapidly leaving California to film outside the United States, where labor costs are lower and tax incentives are greater. Industry workers are exasperated. Is that fair? Are you exasperated? Is that exasperation? So they specifically call out a show on Fox that Rob Lowe hosts. It's a game show called The Floor, and they literally fly Rob Lowe, the host, and 100 American contestants thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean to a studio in Dublin in order to film it, because even with the cost of the flights and the studio in Dublin, it's still cheaper than doing that same work in California. It is wild. So, yeah. It says more financial sense than filming in California. There's a quote from Michael F. Miller Jr., a vice president at the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees who oversees film and television production for the union, has said that roughly 18,000 full-time jobs have evaporated in the past 3 years, primarily in California. Now, the story also says that plenty of production has stayed within the United States, that 38 states have spent more than $25 billion in tax incentives for film and TV, which has led to hubs in states like Georgia, Kentucky's getting up there, Tennessee's getting up there, Nevada's building some culture, Texas is working really hard on a huge tax incentive program. Ted Sarandos. Oh no, that's his name again. He's back. Ted Sarandos, the co-chief executive of Netflix, said in February that the company, which has constructed a filming hub in New Mexico and is building another in New Jersey, would still invest $1 billion over the next 4 years to produce series and films in Mexico. So there's a lot of offshoring happening. There's a quote here. They talked about Aaron Ryder, who was a producer for Arrival and Dumb Money, talking about how significant the country of Hungary, has become for filmmaking, saying that he ran into actor Mark Strong at the Four Seasons Hotel in Budapest while he was scouting for a project. He also had run into Jerry Bruckheimer using a treadmill in that hotel's gym. The quote here is, you can walk into the bar in the lobby in the Four Seasons and probably see more colleagues or actors and directors and agents and people you know there than you can in the Four Seasons in LA. Woo. Yeah. This is hefty, right? And it really kind of boils down to tax incentives, and we'll dig into it because there was another story that came out this week about UK taxpayers and tax incentives in the UK and what they're going to and whether or not they are being effective and helpful for people in the industry. But a couple more things on this story. During the wildfires in January, producer Amy Bayer wanted badly to move her upcoming buddy comedy from Vancouver, BC to LA, thinking that it would help her director, whose neighborhood had been destroyed, and that it would help her city. But when Bayer ran the numbers, she found that it was impossible. To meet the $10 million budget she had, her team would have to cut 10 weeks of work, a third of their shooting schedule. There's a note here that, Governor Gavin Newsom, there are people that think that Gavin Newsom is gasm worthy. Governor Gavin Newsom has pushed to more than double the available funding for the state's tax incentive program. That's still in the works. The New York Times got access to a budget document that showed that the cost of a 7-person grip team for a 30-day shoot in Budapest was going to cost about $59,000. But one person in LA, one grip for the same period of time would cost about $53,000. So that's how much of a huge offset we're seeing, which is driving a ton of people to leave the LA area. It closes out by saying LA now ranks as the 6th best location for filming, according to a survey of studio executives by PodPro, which tracks production trends. Toronto, Britain, Vancouver, Central Europe, and Australia are all considered more desirable, the survey says. So that's a state of what is, right? That is how tough it is right now for film productions in LA and California. Now, let's talk about tax incentives and whether or not they work, which takes us to this story. UK taxpayers contributed 89 million euros to the most expensive movie ever made, which sounds like a complaint. But when you read the story, it's really not. They're talking about how these tax incentive programs are working. And my notes are very heavy on this one. I'm going to have a lot of quotes. So recently filed documents reveal that the HMRC, I'll tell you what that is in a second, gave this upcoming, let me rephrase that. Recently filed documents reveal that the HMRC gave the last Jurassic Park movie 89.1 million euros, believed to be the largest payment for a film since the UK government incentive scheme began in 2007. Now, the HMRC is formerly Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is effectively tax program in the UK. It gives studios a reimbursement of up to 25.5% of the sum they spent on making a movie in the UK, provided that at least 10% of that film's total cost is incurred in the UK. They kind of did a deep dive into this program and whether or not it's working. It says that the last Jurassic World film was one of the most expensive movies of all time in the program, with total costs of ever period, with total costs of $453.6 million. Hold on, we got TikTok. Woo, that's fun. Oh, everybody loves doing a cap show, right? I'm like, find the pineapple. I don't know if I know what a pineapple looks like. Fun fact, pineapple in Portuguese is abacaxi. There's a great word. Okay, so back to this. Dominion was one of the most expensive movies of all time, with total costs of 453.6 million euros, overtaking the previous top spender at 452 million euros, which was for the making of Star Wars: The Force Awakens in 2015. The prequel to it, 2018's Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, banked a further 70.7 million euros from this tax scheme, bringing the total to 159.8 million euros for the two. So the 159, almost 160 million euros in tax incentive given to Universal Studios for the creation, Universal, for the creation of those two movies, and the fact that they filmed it in the UK. Those movies combined for a profit of 3.9 billion euros, which is about $5.2 billion during that time, right? So they made $5.2 billion and still received almost $200 million in tax incentives for the fact that they filmed in the UK. Now, what does that do for the area? Like, what is the benefit to the UK for those tax incentives? One is the latest, the latest data from the British Film Institute, the BFI, shows that in 2019, now this data is a little bit old, we can assume that this is different but similar, that for every euro of reimbursement handed to studios, they generated 8.3 euros of gross value added benefit to the Britain's economy. So for every dollar spent, they're effectively bringing in $8 worth of revenue for the area. It led to a total of 7.7 billion euros in gross value added being generated by the film incentives just in 2019, right? Now, those seems like they're investing even more now. So these tax incentives are working. The other stat that they had here is in 2019, this spending created 49,845 jobs in London and 19,000 plus throughout the rest of Britain. Universal alone spent 37.5 million euros on the staff behind just those two movies. So those tax incentives are directly translating to revenue for the economy. They're translating to jobs and hardworking people that are then able to also spend money within the economy. These tax incentives work. And unless we get some form of additional tax incentive in California, the bad news is that this whole trend is very likely to continue. It's heartbreaking, but that is our deep dive into what's making waves this week.
Forget tuition. This is Film School Dropout, where we teach you what film school won't.
Okay, so the next segment that we do on this show is a fun one. It's called Film School Dropout. It's basically where we save you from making a $50,000 mistake by believing something dumb that you heard on a Reddit thread by digging into it. This big one this week to me is not a $50,000 mistake, but it is something that a lot of people spend time worrying about that they don't need to spend time worrying about. And that is whether or not they need to register, copyright, or NDA protect their script from getting stolen. It's such a common paranoia. Everyone's worried that somebody's going to steal their idea, but nobody is stealing your idea or your script. There are a couple of reasons behind this. Just, first of all, don't waste your time, because if you don't have a script, don't waste your time, because you really can't copyright an idea. Copyright law doesn't cover ideas, only the execution. So what is delivered from that idea? So if you have this cool idea, hey, I'm going to make a movie about zombie beavers, maybe call it Zombievers, that isn't copyrightable and protectable until you actually put pen to paper on a script. If your script is a mess of cliches and steals vibes and ideas from other films, that in itself can't be protected by law either, because other people can demonstrate that they had those ideas first. And both of those things make it very difficult to copyright an idea. I'll also say on the NDA front, asking an executive, an agent, or a producer to sign an NDA before they read your script is, unless you're really, really well established within the industry, it is a no-no. You don't need to give them another reason to not read your scripts. It screams amateur hour. If they like your idea, they'll want to develop it, and they will want to work with you to develop it, or they will not work with you at all. So here's the truth about idea theft. Hollywood it's not stealing scripts. There are very rare cases where this has happened, but it just generally doesn't happen. One, because everyone is busy. They all have their own ideas that they're worried about. Reps get hundreds of pitches a week. People are scared to even think about stealing intellectual property because legal departments train them to avoid unrepresented material. And everybody that you're talking to has probably already seen 10 scripts or ideas just like yours. Not because they copied, but because the ideas are cheap, but the money to put behind an idea is very hard to get. So for every idea, there is very little amount of money that's available to spend making that idea. So your idea has to be so truly unique and revolutionary and attached to a really well-written script for it to even remotely matter. Now, you can and should copyright your script. And if you're in the WGA, you should definitely register your script with the WGA, because it does give you a time-stamped receipt of your idea and your content and protect it and protect you when your movie does enter production in protecting your intellectual property. It is worth doing it for peace of mind if you're going to send it out widely, because a copyright costs, I don't know what it is right now. It used to be $30, maybe it's $60 now. It's not wildly expensive. It doesn't cost a lot to protect your idea, but protect your idea in the form of a completed script. Don't protect your idea in the form of like, oh, I just have this idea and I want to, because there is no legal protection for that. So what you should do instead is focus on writing the hell out of your script, making it unmistakably yours, build relationships and not legal traps for the people that you're networking with. No one's going to option your script because you dropped it into a Dropbox folder with like a really stern disclaimer on it. They're going to do it because the script is good. And then, registering with the WGA and with the Copyright Office once your script is ready is valid, but don't spend your time worrying about people stealing your ideas, because everyone's too busy. Everyone's too busy to steal your idea. They all have their own ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen, but the money behind a production is harder to get. All right, that was Film School Dropout talking about IP theft on the Garvescope Show. I'm your host, Ben Garvis. If you're just joining us, I'm an independent filmmaker, and this is the show that talks about the film industry for business people. Let's get into a segment called Cam A or Cam B.
One choice, two options, and no takebacks. It's time for Cam A or Cam B.
I'm sorry to everybody on TikTok. You don't get these cool little transitions. You just have to watch me sitting here very quietly, sipping on coffee between segments. Oh well. So cam A or cam B? Every decision in filmmaking changes the final product. So what happens when you have two paths to choose from? This is Cam A or Cam B, where we break down two filmmaking industry choices and decide which one is the better move for you. Lights, camera, and let's debate. So today we're going to debate what is the smarter way to market an indie film. Is it to worry about having the best freaking movie trailer ever created, or to really focus in on having a strong film festival presence that builds word of mouth for your film? Let's go into the pros and cons of each, starting with a really good trailer. The pros are that you have an immediate impact, right? A great trailer cuts through all of the noise and it will live forever on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, whatever. It has universal reach, so you can show it to anyone, anywhere, buyers, audiences, your skeptical uncle who still calls movies pictures. You control the narrative, you pick the tone, you pick the pacing, you pick the highlights. You're not at the mercy of a festival's slot or press coverage in order to get views. And it's really kind of the audience first format. If your trailer goes viral, then that is your platform, and you're not waiting for a gatekeeper to stamp your pass and give you access to an audience. There are cons to really focusing on a great trailer, though. It has to be good. And sometimes making good trailers is in itself just as much a science as it is an art, but there is an art piece to it. A bad trailer tanks momentum faster than a delayed release date because you're waiting for something like a film festival run. There's no mystery, there's no magic, there's no interest. The other con I would probably look at is that there's no institutional validation, right? Like, you are seeking public validation instead of institutional validation within Hollywood. Distributors often still want to see something like, a Sundance official selection laurel just to justify taking a bet on your independent film. And social media isn't what it used to be, in that it is not always easy to get eyeballs. So great trailers don't necessarily mean anything if you don't already have a social media audience or a paid strategy to promote your trailer once you publish it. The right trailers will cut through the noise because algorithms, but the wrong ones won't. And it is a gamble if you're only going to pick one of these two things. So let's talk about the positives and negatives of focusing more on a festival run than a really, really world-class trailer. Pros are that you really get third-party credibility. That if you get into a good festival, it's basically like receiving a blue check mark, but from the film gods. You get press, you get buzz, you potentially get buyers. Festivals are designed, the really good ones, to be networking ecosystems. Critics see your films, programmers invite you to the next one, deals get inked in lobbies of film festivals, and they can really definitely within the industry boost your long-term success. Even if your film doesn't sell, a good festival run builds filmmaker reputation. You build relationships with those filmmakers. It makes your next film easier to get into that filmmaker or to that film festival. And it's a kind of, in a lot of ways, a necessary step for playing the long game if you feel like your next movie or the one after that, your next film or the one after that, will be the one that really garners significant attention. You can start not on the first step, but the second step or the third step of the staircase up to your desired audience and level of success. But there are cons to it, right? It is expensive to go to a film festival. It is a slow process. You pay submission fees, you pay for travel, you spend months waiting, doing time doing applications, and there's no guaranteed payoff. I would love to brag that my first feature film was fantastic. It wasn't. But it still did get into 6 film festivals, and it did still win awards at those film festivals. But there just isn't a guaranteed payoff, because the film festivals that it got into are not the film festivals that buyers are going to or that significant audiences are going to. When you do the festival thing, you are at the mercy of gatekeepers, and rejections are not just more common than acceptances, but like 10x, 20x, 100x more common than acceptances. And that, a bunch of programmers in basements watching films now control your destiny, and you have to align with the lineup that year just as much as you have to align with being just a good film. And that means that there can be an audience mismatch. Even if you get into a really prestigious film festival, if you're a sleepy 10 a.m. screening on a Tuesday in Park City, I guess Boulder now, you may not get the momentum that you hoped for, even if you made it into Sundance, or if you made it into South by Southwest, or TIFF, or Cannes. There can be that mismatch. So to me, here's the reality check. In a TikTok-driven world, a great trailer with smart distribution might beat festivals for direct audience building and long-term monetization of your film, especially genre films, comedies, or micro-budget indies. If you handle your business right and you can get your film into even an ad-based video-on-demand platform like Tubi when you do your release, any audience that you build with a really great trailer, any following on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, will be audience you can then reach again to tell them that the film is available, and then you can make revenue from that. But it doesn't diminish the value of film festivals. Film festivals still matter for prestige, credibility, and distribution access. If your goal is to get repped or get reviewed or land a meeting with A24 or Neon, then you are going to want those laurels, and you're going to want to invest the time, money, and effort into getting a solid film festival run. So my take is, if you're only interested in... If your goal audience is the public, then spend your time, money, and effort on a trailer. If your goal is the industry, your goal audience is the industry because you know that your film will be one of the 10 best movies released this year, then focus your time, money, and efforts on a film festival. Okay, that is Cam A or Cam B this week. Now, I want to give you a quick word from our sponsors. It is the Seattle Seahawks. I'm just kidding. We're not sponsored by the Seahawks, but, Seattle Seahawks. We're always happy to disappoint. I think I'm so hilarious. Okay, let's do the next segment, which is going to be Out of Focus. Now, in Out of Focus, we dig into something that I think people are talking about wrong in the industry. In filmmaking, when something is out of focus, it's hard to see what's really going on. And right now, the film industry is obsessing about whether you should spend as much time and money on marketing as you do making your film. But it is a real concern. Well, I guess the question is it a real concern, or are we missing the bigger picture? Let's sharpen up that focus ring and focus in and find out. So, should you spend as much time marketing your film as you do making it? So, let's say you're a filmmaker. You spent 2 years writing, crowdfunding, casting, shooting, editing, color grading, ADRing, fixing frame rates, crying in Premiere Pro, and then you upload your film to Vimeo. You post it once to Instagram, you tweet about it, and that's it. You just get crickets after that. That is how easy first-time filmmakers think the process is. But if you don't invest more effort than that, then you will probably not get return on the time that you spent building your film. So, look, if nobody sees your film, did you really make your film? It's like I can't make a Pope joke. I was going to say, does the Pope shit in the woods? If a tree falls in the woods and nobody is there to hear it, did it actually fall? As a filmmaker, you're not just making art, you are launching a product. And even the best films die in obscurity without a strategy. Think of filmmaking as a marketplace where visibility is survival more so than anything else. Attention is currency in 2025. Distributors want films with heat. Festivals want films with buzz. Streamers want films with data, which you do get from a social media presence. And marketing gives you all three of those things. Marketing, a lot of filmmakers aren't passionate about marketing, but it helps if you think about marketing as storytelling. That your poster, your trailer, your Instagram grid, those are all prequels to your movie. They help you build hype and plant seeds and tell the story behind the story. I was actually talking to somebody about their film project last week, and they were trying to figure out how they should best go about marketing their film. And I was like, well, tell me about your film. And they're like, this guy moves to New York and does this and that. And I'm like, so you have the story that is this segment of a person's life. What questions do you have about that person that are not answered in that, right? What leads up to this event? What happens after this event? What happens around this person when this thing is happening in your film? Are those stories that you could tell? How do you build not just the narrative of we made this, these are the people who were involved in making this, and this is how we made it? And not just the story of this is what this is, just true, here's a trailer of the film, here's what the film's about, here's a film poster that tries to tell you what the film is about. What are the other stories that you could tell? And if you thrive because of the creative side of this industry, then think about it creatively. What are the things that add to that? What gets people passionate about and invested in the character to the point where they will then want to see what happens to the character by going to see your movie? So thinking about it as storytelling is important. And then there's just the straight up number thing of it, right? Like we talked about it earlier on in this episode that every filmmaker, every film studio spends typically the same amount of money marketing a film as they do making that film. Even A24 spends millions of dollars marketing their films. They stage events, they make fake social accounts, they build websites. If they have to fight for attention, if A24 and Neon and Blumhouse have to fight for attention, then so do you, right? Now, there's the flip side of that, right? There are a couple of arguments to say, no, you should not spend money on marketing your film, not to the degree that you do making your film. Here what I hear probably the most when it comes to that argument, and it all kind of circles around to if your film is good enough, it will find its audience. Marketing takes away from the art. You didn't become a filmmaker to become like a full-time social media manager. You are not a brand. You don't view yourself as a brand. And if you wanted to be an influencer, then you would probably be making unboxing videos, right? Or doing TikTok dances or wedding videography. Sorry, I actually do wedding videography. Some films do get discovered, and that's an argument that I see, right? It's not often, but like Primer gets discovered, El Mariachi gets discovered. Marketing is a means to an end, but it's not a guarantee. Putting your film out there without marketing is much less of a guarantee. I'd argue that. And marketing can feel gross, right? Self-promotion is hard, especially for introverted artists, and hustling your own movie can feel like selling your soul one tweet at a time. To that, I go back to think of marketing as storytelling. Think about it from the lens of being a storyteller, and maybe that can help you find a little bit more passion for what you're doing. You don't need to become a marketer, but you do need to have a marketing mindset. I like to, when I'm consulting with people, I like to base my decision making on a process that I call no content left behind. And that is, when you are making a movie, there is a lot of content that you are generating. And maybe not all of it is going, a lot of it's not going to make it into your film. How can you use what was filmed and what went into making your film without abandoning any of it? Do you have B-roll? Do you have bloopers? Do you have how can you move the script? How can you build visuals out of what you have? Did somebody take behind the scenes photos? Do cast and crew, are they taking selfies on set? Those are all things that that are content that you shouldn't leave sitting out there and doing nothing. So look, if you spend 6 months shooting and editing your movie, then I think that you should spend another 6 months building your audience, pitching to press, optimizing your metadata on your website, your social media posts, and making your movie discoverable. Because one, the system isn't fair, and you're giving yourself a leg up as best you can. But two, because your film deserves it. You put in the work to build this film, and it deserves to be promoted to the degree that you can promote it. And the most successful films are the films that spend as much time, money, and effort marketing themselves as they do anything else. So you should factor that into your budget. Or you should say, hey, this is my film budget, and, I'm paying out of pocket for this. It was hard to get this money, and I worked really hard to get this money, and this is the money that I have. But when it's done, I will then say, hey, the next X number of months of my life are dedicated to sweat equity equivalent to the $10,000 that I paid to make my film. I'm going to spend $10,000 worth of effort to then go market and promote it. There's my out of focus segment for today. Let's get into the best part of this show, and that is Real or Real.
Is it a Hollywood classic or complete nonsense created by AI? It's time to play Real or Real.
Not to overuse the trope, but lights, camera, confusion. It's time for Real or Real, the part of this show where I attempt to separate movie magic from pure make-believe. I'm going to be given 2 movie descriptions. One actually got made, and the other one is a total work of fiction. And I will guess, hopefully correctly, or be gaslit by AI and an imaginary blockbuster. This is Real or Real. And so, look, this segment has been my favorite part of this show since we started it later last year. I've been doing four sets of films. One of them is a real obscure film. The other one is a film that was imagined by ChatGPT. And I'd like to, brag a little bit. I think I've done a pretty good job of spotting the AI made up ones. But this is how this is going to work. Each one, I'm going to show you title and description for 2 movies. One of them is real. One of them is made up. Both of them guaranteed obscure. And we'll work together to see if we can figure this out. And we will then go check our work. So the first matchup is Zombie Strippers versus Vampire DJs. Zombie Strippers, a virus turns exotic dancers into the undead, but their stage presence is stronger than ever. That sounds like it could be plausible. Vampire DJs, a secret society of undead DJs controls the underground club scene using music to hypnotize and feed on partygoers. Ooh, I mean, which one of these do you want to be real? Right? I think that's part of the problem here. I'm going to guess the Vampire DJs is probably right. but it does sound like Zombie Strippers is probably has potential to be some not A, B, C, maybe D tier, low quality. Vampire DJs is not a real film. Okay, so I was wrong. We're gonna start with me losing. Zombie Strippers is a real movie, 2008, with Jenna Jameson, Shamron Moore, Roxy Saint, and Penny Drake. Well, put that on your watch list if you're into it. Cool. Let's go to the next matchup. It is... Here we go. Okay. 4th of Die versus Thanksgiving. I'll tell you right now, Thanksgiving sounds like a real movie just by the title. So 4th of Die, a cursed fireworks stand unleashes spectral founding fathers who hunt down those who don't celebrate Independence Day properly. I mean, that actually sounds like real cultural movement here in the United States, unfortunately. Okay, so that's going against Thanksgiving. A demonic turkey goes on a killing spree. Okay, I'm guessing Thanksgiving is the real movie. I can't stand for... There's multiple Thanksgiving sequel, Thanksgiving the musical. Hey, okay, so Thanksgiving came out in 2008, not rated. It's a horror slasher, 1 hour, 10 minutes, with Jordan Downey, Natasha Cordova, and Wanda Lust. Woo! Okay, so we're at 50-50. Let's see if I can even the score. The next film matchup is White Elephant versus Black Sheep. I see what AI is doing here. Okay. White Elephant, a stolen ivory tusk is cursed, causing everyone who touches it to hallucinate a talking elephant that urges them to kill. Oh, do elephants really do that? Is that what they're thinking? Black Sheep, genetically modified sheep in New Zealand turn into bloodthirsty killers. I mean, that's gotta be the real one, right? Sometimes I feel like that these are harder to spot than they are. Wow. Okay, so there are actually 2 Black Sheep movies. One came out in 1996. One came out in 2006. The first one... Oh, that's a Chris Farley movie. Yeah, it's not that one. So it must be the 2006 one. Yes, it is. 2006 horror comedy, 1 hour and 27 minutes with Peter Feeney, Danielle Mason, Nathan Meister, and Glennis Levelstom. Okay. So... I'm losing. The AI is beating me today. It's like they have my number. Okay, the next one. They're playing with rhymes here. It's Candy versus Mandy. Both of them kind of that generic single name movie title. Candy is a dentist with a dark past seeks revenge against the corrupt sugar industry by creating a lethal batch of cursed Halloween candy. Versus Mandy, a lumberjack hunts down a demonic cult after they murder his girlfriend. Candy sounds real. Mandy sounds fun. I'm going to guess Mandy is the movie. Yeah, 2018, Mandy. Oh, with Nicolas Cage. You know what? I've totally seen trailers for this that I have not watched. So 2018 horror action film, 2 hours, 1 minute with Nick Cage. Mandy. Anybody here seen that? Or is this just me messing up? Okay. Let's do The Saucy Butcher versus The Greasy Strangler. Okay, so chefs. Okay, The Saucy Butcher, a food truck owner with a secret taste for human flesh, takes extreme measures to win a national barbecue competition. Yikes. That's against The Greasy Strangler, a father and son run disco tour. A father and son run disco tour business is overshadowed by a series of bizarre, greasy murders? I'm gonna assume the Greasy Strangler is fake because that log line does not make sense as a sentence to me. It's real. 2016 horror comedy The Greasy Strangler, 1 hour and 33 minutes. Hold on, let me read another synopsis here because that just didn't make sense. Okay. Ronnie runs a disco walking tour with his son Braden. When a sexy woman takes the tour, it begins a competition between father and son for her love. It also signals the arrival of an oily stranger who stalks the streets at night. Oily? Why is real life worse than AI? I kind of have to watch it just to know what the heck they mean when they say greasy or oily stranger. Oh, okay. So have I only gotten one right so far? That's rough. Okay, let's do one more. This is Be My Mummy versus Tammy and the T-Rex. I can tell you right now, I have a feeling that Tammy and the T-Rex is a real movie. My mom loves to tell a story about how she was named after a character in a number of movies that her mom loved when she was growing up. That was like Tammy and the... So I'm going to guess that Tammy and the T-Rex is real, even before reading these, but let's see. Oh, maybe not. Okay, hold on. Be My Mummy. A cursed Egyptian prince wakes up in modern-day LA and tries to win back his reincarnated lover before his bandages fully decay. Versus Tammy and the T-Rex. A teenage girl falls in love with a robotic T-Rex inhabited by her boyfriend's brain. That's for sure not the movie my mom was named after, but I still feel like that plot is probably more feasible and real sounding than Be My Mummy. Tammy and the T-Rex, real movie, 1994 horror sci-fi, 1 hour and 22 minutes with Denise Richards and Paul Walker. What? Okay, well, put that on the watch list, right? Okay. That's been Real or Real for this week's episode of the Garvescope show. Consider that our little study break. Right, we have a couple more segments before we call it a day. Next up is taking on the hot take.
Some takes are cold, some are bold, and some are just wrong. This is Taking on the Hot Take.
So my coffee's getting cold. I'm trucking right along, but my coffee is getting cold. I will tell you, compared to the first time that I did this show, you know, running 2+ hours of just talking nonstop, nobody to bounce anything off of, just me, I could not talk the next day. I was so, not just emotionally exhausted, but like my voice was physically exhausted. I'm shocked we've made it this far today. And I'm not feeling tired. Like, let's just keep going. We're on a roll here, right? Let's do Take It on the Hot Take. Filmmaking is built on innovation, but not every trend changes the industry. Some things are the next big thing, and others are just smoke and mirrors. We are going to take on the hot take today. The hot take is that YouTube is the future of film distribution. Specifically picked this topic to push back on what Ted Sarandos was saying about YouTube being a platform for killing time and Netflix being a platform for spending time. I took it personally, and I'm going to argue with it. I'm arguing with Ted Sarandos, co-CEO of Netflix. Look, man, you're not even good enough at your job to be a full-on CEO. And just because I'm a nut job in his not basement, but basement-ish environment, does not mean that I don't have a right to argue with you. So let's talk about YouTube's global reach and their infrastructure. According to Statista, in 2024, YouTube has 2.7 billion, with a B, not to use the cliche, but billion with the B, monthly users. Over 122 million daily users, with a global reach across more than 100 countries. It's available on smart TVs, game consoles, phones, tablets, and you don't need a DCP or a licensing agent to go worldwide if you make it onto YouTube. You don't even need a gatekeeper to make it onto YouTube. You just need to upload it and have it not be copyrighted material, right? Instant access, potential, instant access to an audience of 2.7 billion people per month. Do you have that? Can you pull up any streaming platform that has that following elsewhere in the world where you have instant access to that size of the audience? I would say, why fart? Why fart? Okay, now the show has derailed. Why fight for a tiny art house screen when you have a global cinema in everyone's pocket? Why fight for Netflix when you have instant access to that audience in your pocket? The next thing that people are going to talk about is whether or not YouTube is a viable source of revenue. And I'll tell you this. There is the YouTube Partner Program, the YPP, which gives you access to ad revenue from views once you qualify for it. There is Super Thanks, where viewers can donate to you. There is memberships, where viewers can pay for a monthly membership access to your channel. There are a lot of ways for filmmakers to monetize content that's on YouTube. You also keep the rights. There's no licensing. You just put it up there. And you keep 100% of the cut, minus YouTube's 45% ad share. You're not going to get a deal even remotely as good as that on another platform. Now, the revenue that YouTube makes from an ad view may be different than what Netflix makes from a subscriber and different from what Tubi makes from an ad view. But you're getting a larger share of it if you can get audience to your film. Mix in things like sponsorships, affiliate links, merch using the new YouTube store feature, product placements and getting more value out of your product placements because it has access to a much larger audience. YouTube is actually a very real indie film business model. The average CPM, which is the cost per cost per 1,000 views for filmmakers and entertainment content on YouTube is $4 to $8, depending. Which means that a film with 1 million views could net $4,000 to $8,000 per year before even factoring in other revenue sources. And Netflix is only going to pay you once. YouTube is going to pay you forever. And you still get to sell t-shirts, right? And you still get to own your film. You also have much better discoverability and algorithmic boost on YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world behind Google, which is the same company, and Google's search engine is servicing your YouTube content. They're not servicing Netflix content. You benefit from AI-powered recommendations from Google, who's much better at building smart AI than Netflix is. Your film can go viral without a press tour or billboards or all of the legalese and problems and drama that gets tied up in negotiating with the distributor. There are a couple of examples out there, but the most recent one that comes to mind is Megan, which was a story about an evil doll that was created by Blumhouse Productions, and it was just recently released by Blumhouse directly onto YouTube. So the business model is viable enough that a major studio that produces 10 plus significant movies with a distribution deal on Hulu/Disney is looking at YouTube as a viable place to make money from their films. YouTube's algorithm wants to work for you. A streaming platform that has its own studio, like Hulu, like Amazon, like Netflix, like Disney, does not have the same motivation to boost your content versus the content that they're producing themselves. You don't have that competition on YouTube. You just have the competition of other content creators. And if your film is a good film and people watch it, then YouTube is going to surface that film to people. You have more opportunity to succeed. Here's something that you don't get on a conventional streaming platform either. You get access and the opportunity to build a community with long-term value in a way that you don't get on a streaming platform. You can build a fan base through subscribers, not just screening the film to people once and not being aware of who you are or following you. You have an opportunity to build cult status, especially in the comments section. Interacting with people in the comment section, that's something you don't get from a streaming platform. You can learn a lot from that, what worked, what didn't work. You can interact with your audience and build that relationship. You are building long tail engagement with your content that generates passive revenue for years, not just like a brief 30-day window where you're disproportionately being surfaced by something like Netflix's algorithm. There are a lot of creators and channels that are thriving posting video content. Joel Haver, Dustin McLean, DIY Effects, King Vader. One of my favorite channels is Dust, and what they do with indie short sci-fi films. It is a very real place to do this and to drive, not just drive, to be the engine for your career moving it forward. In a lot of ways, the traction that YouTube is giving creators is eroding the foundation that is supporting the industry gatekeepers. Only 28% of indie films secure meaningful distribution deals after film festivals, and that's from Sundance data in 2023. It's actually a much lower number, right? If you factor in the 10,000+ film festivals that occur around the world every year, you are not getting that same level of engagement worldwide and with a much larger data set than what Sundance pulled there. If you do get a meaningful distribution deal from your film festival run, the average upfront licensing fee is under $25,000, and that's a one-time payment. Streamers don't usually offer back-end deals. So you weigh a one-time payment of less than $25,000. I'll move over here so that TikTok can see my hand. This is my little scale. That one-time payment of $25,000 with no back-end to YouTube, where you have full evergreen access, eternal access to the revenue from your film, granted that you don't break any copyright laws, 100% of that revenue for the I'll say the foreseeable future, as long as YouTube is relevant and a place where individuals are going for content. Creators can earn pretty easily $50,000 plus a year. Not easily, but they can earn $50,000 plus a year in ad revenue with under 100,000 subscribers. Subscribers aren't even that necessarily relevant anymore, because all that really truly matters is that your film has grown enough watch time that users stay on watching it long enough for it to outperform some of the other things that are considered competitors to it. If Google/YouTube sees that your film is performing well, it will continue to promote that film. Gatekeepers are opening the door less and less. This allows you to just walk the F around that door and directly to your potential audience. Now, there are some, I would say probably 3 counterpoints to this, and I will shoot them down very happily. One of them is that if YouTube is free, how are you going to make money? I would say that when you compare it to something like a self-funded video on demand campaign, you're being monetized for the attention that you bring the platform, not the one-time fee of the platform paying for you to be on the platform. What that means is the ads that Google surfaces on your video on YouTube play, and they play more and more and more the more that somebody watches your video. These platforms are obsessed with user retention. YouTube's most important metric is how much time a user spends on their platform and on your video. And if they spend significant amount of time on your video, more ads play, and that's more revenue for you, and they want to show that video more than other videos where watch time is less. If you're concerned that posting your film to YouTube is going to cheapen your art, my argument would be so will being broke and unknown, which does not enable you to do follow-up projects. Distribution, as much as you want it to be, is not about prestige. It's about visibility. The prestige comes after people know who you are. What can you do with prestige except leverage that for your next project? Now, the third one is that you just want a theatrical run. And like, great. You can have a theatrical run. Nothing's stopping you from pursuing film festivals, pursuing other avenues, and then looking to YouTube as your backup plan. I wouldn't even say you should look at YouTube as your backup plan. I would say you should look at YouTube as your end game. To say, I'm going to exhaust these other avenues. Maybe my film is one of the 10 best films of the year. It's going to get into Sundance, and it's going to get a streaming deal, and you're going to ride that wave until you can't. And then your last opportunity is to put it on Tubi or put it on YouTube. If you're not that fortunate, but you try all these other avenues and you're not successful with them, let's say you have some small detail that also prevents you from posting your video or getting your video through something like Film Hub and onto Tubi. Great. You still have YouTube as a very viable opportunity to make money from your film, to build an audience from your film, and work toward a future where you can then work on your next project. Whew. Okay. That was a lot, but that is taking on the hot take for this week. Let's do Lights, Camera, Lawsuit, which I forgot does not have a sting. There's no sting. Okay, Lights, Camera, Lawsuit. The magic of Hollywood, the glitz, the glamour, and the inevitable lawsuits. In Lights, Camera, Lawsuit, this is the part of the show where we look at the fine print, the bad contracts, the legal battles, and ask questions about what they mean in the industry. Today, we're going into another courtroom showdown that is equal parts absurd and educational. So let's see who got sued, and let's talk about why we can definitely avoid becoming the same cautionary story. The lawsuit that we're talking about today is called Wolf versus Universal City Studios LLC. It was a 2022 lawsuit, so relatively recent. Right? We've done lawsuits from the 30s. I think we did one from the 1918-ish era. We've done a couple. This one's relatively modern. The idea in Wolf v. Universal City Studios is that fans sued Universal Pictures for falsely advertising after actress Ana de Armas appeared in the trailer, but not the final film, of yesterday, the Beatle film with Dev Patel. So, 2022, two fans, Peter Rosa and Connor Wolf, filed a lawsuit against Universal Pictures after renting the 2019 film yesterday for $3.99, expecting to see Ana de Armas, who appeared in the trailer. However, her scenes were cut from the final film. They claimed that this was false advertising, and they sought $5 million in damages. The legal journey on this. The initial ruling, the U.S. District Judge Stephen Wilson allowed the lawsuit to proceed. He basically stated that the movie trailers are commercial speech subject to false advertising laws and not artistic or free speech. He emphasized that while trailers involve creativity, their primary purpose is to sell a movie by providing a preview. Now, Universal came back to this. Their defense was that trailers are protected under the First Amendment right as artistic, expressive works, but the court found that this protection does not override the commercial nature of a movie's trailer. So not a good start, right, for Universal. I love this segment because the legal side of the film industry is fascinating and sometimes petty. But I hate it because the studios somehow always win. So this case was dismissed. The lawsuit faced complications when one plaintiff rented the movie a second time on a different platform to gather evidence, which the judge deemed as a self-inflicted injury. So the case was dismissed, and the plaintiffs were then ordered to pay $126,705 for Universal's legal fees. There are a couple of implications for this. One, marketing practices, right? Studios, filmmakers, and the like need to exercise great caution in trailer content to avoid potential legal issues, ensuring that trailers accurately represent the final product. Don't put an actor in your trailer that is not in the film. Don't advertise the film as being something that it is not. That authenticity can go a long way with an audience, but it can also go a long way in protecting you in court. This basically gave legal precedent saying that trailers can be considered commercial speech so that you are liable for the accuracy of that trailer as an advertisement. And then on the creative side, you're going to face challenges potentially in balancing creative marketing strategies, clickbait life, with legal considerations about how practical, honest, and real your trailer is and how well it represents the experience that your film will be. The case underscores the importance of transparency in marketing, which is something that I am a big advocate for as somebody who does way too much marketing in his life. You carry the responsibility ultimately for representing the content that you're advertising. And maybe Universal wasn't held accountable in this situation. I don't have the backstory about why Ana de Armas's cameo or role in the film was cut. It's very likely that it was for time or something like that, not necessarily malicious. I don't think it was intentional to put her in the trailer and then not put her in the movie. There's a disconnect. Marketing team is very different than the filmmaking team. But that had real implications, and that's why sometimes Lights Camera Lawsuit is an interesting and necessary thing for us to talk about. Thanks for drudging through it. Let's finish with such an interesting story on Follow Steven Follows.
The numbers don't lie. We're following Steven Follows.
So if you don't know who Steven Follows is, I should actually Google him at some point. But no, go to StephenFollows.com. StephenFollows.com. He does these incredible data-backed deep dives into nuances in the film industry. And he had some doozies this week. I have 4 stories specifically that I want to talk through. One of them is that he actually went into all of the patent filings that Netflix has to look at what that may say about how Netflix views the future of the film industry. I want to go specifically to the second section of this, how it's made. So these are patents that Netflix has that talk about how films are ultimately made, sometimes through AI and sometimes through other measures. The three of these really stood out to me. One of them is the AI-generated trailers and previews. Machine learning picks out the key moments from films and shows to automatically build trailers, highlighting and promotional highlights and promotional clips, cutting down on manual editing. So basically, when you're scrolling and a film doesn't necessarily have a trailer, or Netflix isn't happy with the trailer, the idea here is that it just uses AI to pull out the most important moments, show you flashes of those, and those are the things that are going to motivate you to watch that film. Interesting use of AI, doing it without... So it's a little bit misleading because AI generated trailers isn't necessarily accurate. It's trailers that were curated using AI. So they're not necessarily making anything from new, they're cutting it from scratch. Worth flagging, there are two other ones, interactive and branching stories. So Netflix creates interactive titles where user choices shape the narrative path. The system predicts choices and buffers likely segments in advance of the streaming experience. So if you watched Black Mirror Bandersnatch, is that even a fair thing? If you played Black Mirror Bandersnatch, it's been a couple of years since I feel like was that during the pandemic or was that pre-pandemic? It was the choose your own adventure Netflix / Black Mirror experience. I hated it because I kept getting cut in the same loop. I felt like no matter what I did, it always ended the same way. And it felt like it was ending early. Anyway, this is basically, they own the patent for that. We haven't seen that really come back up, but they have the capabilities and they own the patent. So there's a possibility of that resurfacing. The last one is promo artwork and thumbnails picked by algorithms. Algorithms select the most effective video frames and images to use as thumbnails or promotional artwork, taking into account face detection, color, and likely engagement. So think of this, I mean, I don't know the technology, but this is what this screams to me. Think of this as Netflix saying, we have this movie, full duration of this movie, and literally, if it's in 24 frames per second, every second of this movie represents 4 potential frames that we could show somebody as a thumbnail, and every second of the movie of footage is something that we could display to somebody as a segment of the movie. And so let's build an automated process that that first identifies the things that we believe would perform best as a thumbnail and as a preview. And then let's test those and see which ones perform best with this audience versus this audience. Hey, this guy really likes submarines, so this movie that has a 2-second clip of a submarine, we're going to show him that 2-second clip as a part of the preview. He's that much ultimately more likely to watch it. Interesting use of technology. I wanted to flag that. That was an interesting deep dive. Who would have thought going into and looking at Netflix's patents could tell you something about where they want to go as a business. Also kind of talks about where they've been as a business. Really interesting read. Totally worth subscribing to StephenFollows.com for more on that. There are 3 other Stephen Follows stories that I really feel like I have to talk about. One of them, he dug into 160,000 questions that filmmakers asked on Reddit and what those filmmakers were asking. So effectively, what are the most common topics that people are asking questions about? there were really two things here that, well, there are a lot of things here to flag, but I will say beyond just subscribing to Stephen Follows, I definitely highly encourage you to go to engagefilmmakers.com. He built this really great guide, basically a report on the industry, and go support this guy because the work that he does is just so freaking incredible from an analysis standpoint, but just from like just the insights. It's just fascinating the way, not just how he looks at these things, but what the data even say about this. So engagefilmmakers.com and stephenfollows.com. There were a couple of things that I wanted to flag. First is like everyone's asking a lot about gear. And when it comes to gear, 18% about, 18-ish% about cameras and post-production gear. I don't think you would be surprised to find that gear is a very, very common topic. He found that there were a lot of posts about mental health. And he actually kind of broke this down into how frequent they were, mostly around the toxicity of industry culture. Those had the highest kind of engagement rates and number of comments on them. More about the second would be creative process, then self-reflection, and then kind of a similar culture around, or a similar level of engagement around harassment and anxiety and motivation and well-being and logistics and all of that. On the business side of things, there's the business side of the industry, but talking about set life, I think the thing that I would talk about here on the business side is talking about the legalities of this, like copyright and deal structures and paperwork. That is not. I normally recommend lawyers, not Reddit, as a source of legal advice. That threw up a little, I'm not going to say red flag, but a little yellow flag to me, not because of Steven's reporting, but like if filmmakers are trusting Reddit as a source for legal advice, that's not a good start. Beyond that, they talked about, set life. They talked about, lost it there for a second. I really liked this. They talked about what separated respected film festivals from a scam. So when it comes to Reddit reactions to filmmaker questions around film festivals and distribution, results, lots of comments, and scams, really high score and a lot of comments. People are really curious about avoiding film festival scams, 1, and 2, how to make the most out of the time, money, and effort they spend on film festivals, and avoiding scams is an important part of that. This Reddit community is the right place, I think, for conversations about film festivals that are not delivering value. There are many, many, many small film festivals out there that are doing the right thing, but there are also many, many, many film festivals out there, big and small, that are not doing the right thing. And Reddit is the perfect place for flagging those things and having those conversations, because you don't necessarily get that same level of support, with all due respect, from Film Freeway, where you are typically submitting to these film festivals. They are a home to a lot of predatory film festivals. Okay, the next one is I wanted to say it was clickbait, but this was fascinating. Was Harvey Weinstein thanked more often than God at the Oscars? So I talked about this at the top of the show. This was a story that was circulating at the peak of the origins of the Me Too movement, that Harvey Weinstein had been thanked more than God at the Oscars. Now, is that true? Stephen went in and actually tried to get down to the bottom of this for you, mapping it out. And so there are a couple of things I want to show here. The first one is, well, there's a lot from, how many words are in Oscar speeches, words by award, what people are talking about, activism versus personal journey versus industry commentary. But the meat and potatoes, the one I want to get down to, number one, is the role of religious references in Oscar thanks speeches. Look at this. It wasn't high. It started very low. It wasn't until really the 1960s that Oscar speeches started to rise. Mentions of God and religion in Oscar speeches started to rise. It largely peaked around 25% of acceptance speeches in the 2000s and has been a little bit lower since then. But those themes largely did not exist 50, 60, 70 years ago and are much more prevalent today than they were then. That was fascinating to me. I didn't expect that. I would have thought that generally they have been on the decline. Nope. Last 2 decades. But now, let's talk about Harvey Weinstein versus God. So, was Harvey Weinstein thanked more than God in Oscar speeches? No, he wasn't. Now, it was pretty close in the 1990s. He was mentioned in just over 5% of speeches, but religion was mentioned in just over 6%. That was as close as he got in the 2000s and 2010s. The Harvey Weinstein thanking went down. But this is item number 3. This is mind-blowing. Is there somebody in Hollywood who was thanked more than God in Oscar acceptance speeches? I'll give you 1 second to think about it. Did you come up with somebody? Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg in the 1980s and 1990s received more thanks in Oscar speeches than God or religion. So I love this story, one, because giving credit where credit is due, Steven Spielberg giving back in the community, but also taking credit where credit is not due. Harvey Weinstein, not a good person, was not thanked more than God. Thank God? And, woo, I can't believe we did it. Oh, wait, no, we got one more. I forgot. Okay. Woo, okay. This is one I'm going to, again, I can't thank Steven enough for the stories that he writes. They're so freaking incredible. This one, I'm just gonna, I'll hand this off to you. You can go read this yourself. StevenFollows.com. The headline here is that he basically talked to 300 plus film market professionals and asked them what are the most common reasons that they decline films for distribution. He has a really great list of 18 takeaways from recognizable talent to trust in the film industry, all the way down to overlooking the power of universal storytelling. Go read the story. It is 100% worth your time. Shout out to Steven Follows. He doesn't know that we do this segment, but I do, and I'm grateful. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up the Garvescope show for what is today, May 2nd, 2025. I have been your host. I am Ben Garvis, independent filmmaker. I represent Garvescope. We are a free online marketplace where filmmakers can post their films and film projects. If your film is still a project and is still seeking funding, we are the place for you. If you are a completed film, we are the place for you. It takes you about 5 minutes to submit your film to the Garvescope Film Marketplace at garvescope.com. From there, you get free access to film investors, film sponsors, product placement opportunities, film buyers, and streaming platforms that are looking for films to acquire. Go check it out at garvescope.com, G-A-R-V as in Victor, E-S-C-O-P-E.com. For Garvescope, I am Ben Garvis. Thank you for watching the Garvescope Show, and we will catch you next week.
That's a wrap. See you next time on Garvescope Show. And cut. Print. We're out.